When I think about someone who is generous, I think about Howard Johnson. I think about the coffee service that he prepared for years and years for this church, both at this location and the other location. Coffee can seem like not a big deal, and you may not even have noticed that someone was taking care of it for you. It's not just about having the coffee. There's actually, I think, a lot to it. I mean, I don't know where the coffee pots go. I don't know where they're stored. I don't know where the filters are. I don't know how to work those machines. And I sure don't want to stick around after service to clean them and dry them and put them back wherever they go. But Howard did. And he did it for a long time with great steadfastness. And I think he did it because he cares about this body. And he wanted to help create an environment where we could fellowship with one another and be hospitable to our guests. So, yeah, I think that's pretty generous.
So the individual I'm going to speak of is Reverend Dr. William Barber. He's a Protestant minister and political activist. He's a professor of the practice of public theology and public policy and founding director of that institute at Yale Divinity School. He's an author of a number of books. Some of those books are We Are Called to Be a Movement, Revive Us Again, Vision and Action in Moral Organizing, and the Third Reconstruction. He's been somebody that I've watched over time to see what his movement is all about. And I'm still watching him. I think the biggest takeaway from him as far as generosity is time. He's not a wealthy person, but he spends an awful lot of time with people that he is concerned with. If time was measured by generosity, I think he'd be a king.
I want to talk about my friend Nick Galtney. And in the early days of the Engage ministry, Nick and I put in a lot of work together, and nobody knows the hours Nick put in building different parts of the sound system. If you've seen the in-ear monitors that we wear, just learning that whole process took time. And Nick, he's cringing right now just hearing me talk about him because he's that humble of a person. He was so dedicated to making that work and making the worship experience so good for everybody who joined. And I think what's really cool about the way Nick has been generous in the Engage ministry is he's put in time, and he's put in talent, and he's put in funds, and he's just all in. And so seeing how dedicated he's been to the mission and how humbly he's done that, and how much he's poured into that ministry, who can measure the outcome? But people have grown spiritually. And so, thank you, Nick. And, there's a lot of other people that help with Sunday morning tech team and other types of effort like Nick has done. So if you see someone on tech team, give them a fist bump and maybe volunteer.
When I think of generosity, I don't always think of someone that has a lot of money to give. I know someone that gave from their heart, and she didn't have very much. Her name is Verda Burns, and she lived in Irving, Texas, but I like to call her Grandma Burns. I spent lots of summers with her in her little house that was not always air conditioned. She taught me how to give in prayer. She opened her home to so many people. Her little front room had an air conditioner, a window unit, and so that was the room for visitors. She opened that room for summer interns, for young mothers that weren't married, that were expecting a baby. Invited her neighbors over at all times. Anyone that needed something, her home was open. She worked for the church before it was cool for a woman to work in a ministry and she ran the nursery there in her church, and I loved learning from her. Also, one of my favorite things was the Joy Bus. All summer I got to ride the Joy Bus with her, and we would knock on doors and we would invite children to come to church. And one of the things I remember I thought was amazing, she crammed in as many children in her little car and took them to town to buy them shoes. So yes, she was a woman that inspired me, and she didn't have much, but she gave a lot.